What is up, guys? Doomwake here, and welcome to another video on the channel. As you can see, or maybe can't see, I am recovering from my trip to San Diego. Got a little sunburnt there. I'm not going to take my hat off. It's a lot worse under there. Let's just say I forgot to bring a hat, forgot to wear some sunscreen. Anyways, we are here to talk about March of the Machines, because that is the new set that is coming out, and it is going to be available, I think, on Magic Online about 7 days from now. I think it's next Tuesday. But in the meantime, while we can't play with the new cards yet, we can discuss the new cards. And on my stream, I kind of did like a little top 10 plus some honorable mentions of cards that I think are going to have an impact. Mostly Pioneer. There's maybe one or two on the list that are potentially players in Modern, but as you all know, I am primarily a Pioneer player, so I am looking through the lens of the Pioneer format. Let me know what you think of the new set. Give me your picks for top couple of cards in the set. I want to hear what you guys are all excited to play with. And without further ado, let us get started. Honorable mention number 1, Hidetsugu and Kairi. So this is a card, as you can see on your screen. It is a 5/4 flying for 5 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you brainstorm, draw 3, put 2 back. And when it dies, you exile the top card of your library. Target opponent loses life equal to its mana value. Then if it's an instant or sorcery, you can cast it without paying its mana cost. So the idea here is you are pairing that alongside, this one. Nope, I can't figure it out. There we go, did it. So this is the card that you're pairing alongside. It's Explosive Singularity. So basically the combo is you play Hidetsugu, put back Explosive Singularity, sacrifice your Kaido, your Hidetsugu, excuse me, and then you reveal this, which deals them 10, because it deals damage equal to the mana cost, and then you can cast it for free, which deals them another 10. I don't know if this combo is necessarily good enough. It's definitely not good enough for Modern, potentially good enough for Pioneer, but one thing you gotta remember is both of these cards are standard legal, so this is something that is available to play in Standard. I'll probably try a little bit of it in Pioneer, excuse me. But the thing about Pioneer is there's not a lot of good sacrifice outlets is the issue. So I'll have to make something, but just keep that in the back of your mind. Hidetsugu plus Explosive Singularity, 20 to your opponent. So I'm not really sure about this one, but Halo Hopper. So this is a very simple card, 3 mana 3/2 with Convoke. So your creatures can help you cast it. At the end of the day, this is essentially a free 3/2. I'm not entirely sure what decks are in the market for a effectively free 3/2, because you have to do a little bit of work for it. But worth noting that Ornithopter is a card that is legal in Pioneer. Yeah, Frog Champ. So there could potentially be some sort of like artifact/affinity style deck with like this and Ornithopters and Machiko's Reign of Truth. Maybe you throw in Soul Artifact in there, but not 100% sure what the rest of the deck looks like. Baral and Karizev. So I kind of dismissed this one at first, but somebody had actually brought up a very, very good point. So there's a lot of text on this card, but basically when you cast a spell, the first spell, instant or sorcery, you can cast a spell with lesser mana value that shares a card type with it from your hand without paying its mana cost. So the joke here is, and then if you don't, you make a 2/1. But the joke here is when you combine it with, let me grab the other window here. When you combine it with, you probably know where this is going. Whoops. When you combine it with Treasure Cruise, what happens is if you delve your graveyard away, say maybe you like fill up your graveyard a bunch in the first couple of turns, and then turn 4 you go Baral and Karizev, 1 mana Treasure Cruise. You can actually then cast any of the ultimatums. I think the best one is probably this one. But all of the ultimatums that are in Pioneer cost 7 mana, and Treasure Cruise cost 8 mana. So that's kind of the combo here. I'm sure I will try it and waste quite a few tickets and waste quite a few tickets on it. Not sure if it's actually that good, but it's definitely interesting. This was a card that, when I first saw on the spoiler, I didn't think too much of it, but the more you read it, This card does a lot of stuff. So 3 mana 1/1 has backup 2, so you can put the counters on any creature. So you can put it on itself, you can put it on another creature, and then 1, sacrifice this creature, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. But what you can do is, like, if you, say, play this with a spare mana up, maybe you target, like, a Kroxa or something, you can just go, put 2 counters on my Kroxa, attack for 8, and then use the 1 mana to sack the Kroxa and dome them for 8. So there's potentially some good stuff to do with it. Past that, like, it's tough because it works very well with creatures that have high power. So maybe, like, Rotting Regisaur, potentially? Yeah, I guess you could do it with Hammer Time, too, where you could, like, put this in the... It's a warrior. That's pretty relevant, right? This being a warrior is probably relevant. Because you can do, like, Resolute Strike stuff. Yeah, I guess that's true. Well, I was thinking... Oh, yeah, because you can't respond. Okay, yeah, you can't really do it with Kroxa, never mind. New Yargle is 18 power. We're not doing that. But, like, yeah, you could do stuff maybe with Rotting Regisaur. You could go turn 3 Regisaur, turn 4, like, play this, attack for 9, post-combat, sack the Regisaur, and 9 them. Ancient Imperiosaur. 7 mana, 6/6, with Convoke. Trample and Ward 2. Enters the battlefield with 2 counters on it for each creature that convoked it. Now, specifically in Pioneer, there are some cards that, like, are just cheap token makers. So you have, like, I guess Wedding Announcement's not cheap, but you have, like, Raise the Alarm, Legion's Landing. There's potentially some sort of green-white tokens deck that you could play. But, I mean, I could just envision this being, like, a 3 mana 12/12 or something. Like, would you play a 3 mana 12/12 with Trample Ward 2? That's pretty good stats, you know what I mean? So I think this card has a lot of potential, and the Ward kind of, sort of protects it for a turn. Yeah, I guess 3 mana would be 14/14, but yeah, maybe Hordeling Outburst. You could do Gleeful Demolition, potentially. But I'm thinking green-white, where you can go Resolute Reinforcements and Raise the Alarm. Those are both Pioneer legal. You could do something like that. Green-white already kind of has some token support. It has the X spell, the March of the Multitudes, I think it is, that makes X tokens. Or you could do something like that. All right, number 10. This might be the most unassuming card on the list. This card, I think, is secretly insane. Maybe not secretly, but 1 mana for an 0/1. Backup 1. So backup is when this creature enters the battlefield, put a counter on something. If it's another creature, it gains the following ability until the end of turn, and then 1, sacrifice this creature, draw a card. This card is dope. Like, it's so dope. There's so many cool things you can do with it. Like, you can put a counter on your Unlucky Witness to sacrifice itself if you don't have an oven. You can, like, in any situation where you don't have an oven, this can just, like, trigger your Witness. It can, like, sack a cat if you have extra food in play. Triggers Devil. I'm just thinking about it in the context of Rakdos, but as Ferrando points out, even just with, like, Extraction Specialist, maybe in, like, a black... there's, like, the Abzan Tyvar deck that I know Todd was floating around with. You could play this with, like, just get it back with Extraction Specialist, get it back with Tyvar. Like, there's just so many cool things you could do with it. I absolutely adore this card. I think it's great. You knew this was going to be on my top 10, chat. People, every single person in chat knew that this was going to be on the top 10. So, Galta and Maverin, excuse me. I'll read it to you. It is a 7 mana 12/12 trample, legendary creature, dinosaur, vampire. That might come up later. Whenever you attack, choose one. Create a... Oh, I thought it says whenever this attacks. Oh, it's a lot better than I thought it was. Create a tapped and attacking XX green dinosaur where X is the greatest power among other attacking creatures, or create X1/1s where X is the number of other attacking creatures. So... Oh, I didn't put the sub alert on here. I'll put that in a second. The combo here is, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, Sorin Imperious Bloodlord, which is a card that has seen some Pioneer play, but this is statistically the biggest vampire that we've ever seen, that we've ever had so far. So this is This is what we're doing it with. Sorin, Imperious Bloodlord. I could even see something like turn 1 Llanowar Elves, turn 2 Sorin downtick. So, something like that. Maybe you play like Black-White Vampires. Maybe you go back to the 5-drop that draws cards or something like that. But there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it. All right, number 8, Wrenn and Realmbreaker. So this is, there's a lot of words on this, but 4 loyalty for 3 mana, and it pluses to 5 loyalty, which is pretty important on a 3 mana Planeswalker. Getting to 5 loyalty in the first turn, that's pretty good. It has lands, all of your lands have tap and 1 mana of any color, so it just automatically fixes your mana, which is pretty good. +1, make a land a 3/3 that has Vigilance, Hexproof, and Haste until your next turn. It's still a land. Notably, that ability does not untap the land, because that would be kind of broken. -2, mill 3, you may put a permanent card from among the milled cards into your hand. Also, notably, you can only get a permanent from the top 3. If it was worded just, you may put a permanent from... you may take a permanent from your graveyard, put it into your hand, probably be too good. So you can tell these numbers and these words are kind of tested. And then -7 is your emblem. You get an emblem that says you may play lands and cast permanent spells from your graveyard, which is similar to like the Wrenn and 6 emblem. Kind of. It's a little bit different, but I don't know. I like this card quite a bit. I think the biggest application when it comes to Pioneer specifically is with Jeskai Ascendancy, which I'll put up here in just a second. But Jeskai Ascendancy is a deck that has, been fringe for a little bit. It was actually quite good before Expressive Iteration got banned. But the nice thing about Wrenn is it gives you the creature that it makes has hexproof. So if you're trying to go off with Jeskai Ascendancy on that turn, you were previously able to go off with like Sylvan Caryatid and stuff, but you didn't have like another copy of Sylvan Caryatid to be able to go off with. And the fact that it gives the land hexproof is kind of massive for that turn that you're trying to go off. So I could definitely see it. The one issue is like, it's kind of hard to have a mana base that can reliably cast both Jeskai Ascendancy and Wrenn on turn 3, because Wrenn is double green, Jeskai is blue, white, red. Obviously, once you have Wrenn in play, your mana is fixed for Jeskai Ascendancy, but the issue is your mana base has to be able to reliably cast a green-green spell and a Jeskai spell on turn 3, which is not easy. Number 7, Chrome Host Seedshark. So, this card, I think this card's really good. So 3 mana for a 2/4 flyer, which is, I think, pretty good stats, right? Doesn't die to Bone Crusher, doesn't die to Lightning Strike, Strangle. There's a lot of things that it dodges. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, incubate X, where X is that spell's mana value. So, there is sort of a similar direct comparison that's already legal in Pioneer. Obviously, Shark Typhoon does quite a bit more than this card. It's more flexible in the sense that you can cycle it and, make a chump blocker. You can cycle it later and make a big creature. The tokens that you make off Shark Typhoon immediately come into play as creatures instead of incubate tokens, so you don't have to pay additional mana to do it. Obviously, Shark Typhoon is a better card. But the nice thing about Chrome Host Seedshark is you can play it on turn 3. Just a 2/4 flyer for 3 mana is not a bad body. Like, the body is just fine. And from there, like, yes, you need to spend mana on the incubate tokens, but if you're casting stuff like Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time and Temporal Trespass, like, if you're getting an 8/8, do you really care about spending an additional 2 mana? So, Leyline Binding, you know what I mean? I don't know. Surge of Salvation. Now, if this were a Modern-only stream, this would probably be the best card in the set. Given that I don't play a ton of Modern, I still wanted to have it on my list because I want to respect that it's here, and I do think that the card existing in Modern is quite good for the Hammer Time deck, obviously. This card does a lot of stuff. In Pioneer specifically, it could be good in the... Like, I could see you maybe playing this in the Mono-White Human sideboard, because this... So, humans will typically play a card like Brave the Elements to kind of get around protection. Now, it obviously doesn't do the same thing as Brave the Elements, But the nice thing about Surge specifically, I always do that. I keep hitting the wrong button. The nice thing about Surge specifically, with compared to something like Brave the Elements, is Surge can protect you from Thoughtseize, because it says you and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. So it's maybe a little bit more utility than Brave, and I've seen a lot of the mono white humans decks in Pioneer cutting Brave anyways. So I don't know, maybe this could be a good sideboard card for them. There's also maybe some like decks that have a white splash, like maybe Greasefang wants to sideboard this because it protects Greasefang and also stops them from getting Thoughtseized. Number 5, Rona, Herald of Invasion. So this card is a 2-mana 1/3. Says whenever you cast a legendary spell, untap Rona. Tap, draw a card, discard a card. It has a transform ability for 5 and a black, or 5 and a Phyrexian black. We can look at the backside, but you're basically never transforming this. But the backside is 5/5 trample whenever a sword. I actually didn't even realize it had a backside until now, because I never read the back half. But 5/5 trample whenever a source deals damage to Rona. That source's controller exiles a card from their hand at random. If it's a land, you put it into the battlefield under your control. Otherwise, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. But we don't really care about the backside. What we care about is the first 2 lines of text. 2-mana 1/3, cast a legendary spell, untap it, and then tap, draw, discard a card. So you can probably imagine where I'm going with this one when you pair it alongside Mox Amber. Pretty good, because the Rona turns on the Mox Amber untaps the Rona. Pretty good synergy there. And then when you pair those 2 cards with Retraction Helix, that is infinite loots. I think it's just loots, right? Or is it also infinite mana? Because you can go Helix the Rona, tap the Rona, bounce the Mox, cast the Mox, untap, make a mana. It's infinite mana, right? Oh yeah, so it's infinite mana, and then it's infinite loots, right? Oh, it's one or the other, right? Wait, how is it infinite loots? Because you go Helix the Rona. Right, yeah, it doesn't generate infinite loots. It's just infinite mana. Right, okay. I guess you can get infinite loots with Unctus. Yeah, it's infinite cast of any legendary spell, because you get infinite mana with the Mox Amber, and then you can start going off with it. So I think I remember S. Shearing. I think that was the individual who was in Spike's chat who had redeemed a deck tech, and I believe the deck list that they had submitted was the combo was you go infinite with Tyvar, right? Where you go like, because you have infinite mana, and then you go cast Tyvar, untap Rona, -3 with Tyvar, tap the Rona, bounce the Tyvar, recast, blah 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 blah, repeat. So, and then eventually you mill your whole deck and then eventually put a Fastest Oracle into play. Number 4 on our top 10 list, Invasion of Gobakhan. This is a 2-mana battle. This is the first battle we've seen. 2 mana. It is a battle siege, so for those of you who don't know what battles are, basically they come in with a number of defense counters equal to the number in the bottom right. The battle, I believe, is controlled by you, but you attack the battles. I think you control it, if I'm correct. But it's basically like something that you have to attack and deal 3 damage to. Enters the battlefield, look at target opponent's hand. You may exile a non-land card from it. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. A spell, basically, it's like the Elite Spellbinder thing. You take a card, and then as long as that card remains exiled, even if Invasion leaves the battlefield, it costs 2 more mana. And then it has 3 defense, and then it flips into Light Shield Array, which is an enchantment that says at the beginning of your end step, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that attacked this turn. And then you can also sacrifice Light Shield Array to have creatures you control gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. This is a lot. So now, the one thing that you have to realize with battles, and something that I maybe still quite can't comprehend on first look because we just haven't played with them yet, think about battles as... It's hard to describe this, but like, imagine a battle that comes into play with like 5 defense counters. you have to deal 5 damage to that battle with your creatures before it flips. So basically you're giving up, this one has 3 defense counters. So basically you're giving up a certain number of damage equal to the defense counters. And the question you have to ask yourself, you basically have to ask yourself 2 questions. 1, am I giving up too much damage for the backside to be worth it? And 2, like, how many turns does that take for me to flip this card? Now, with this one specifically, I think the front half is good enough. Just 2 mana, basically double tax a card from your opponent's hand, and you get perfect information because you can just look at their hand. And then the backside is like a pretty good Anthem that also has some Wrath protection. So I think this one has enough stuff going on, and it's only 3 defense, so you don't really have to give up too much damage to flip it. That I think this one is probably the most aggressively costed battle, being like 2 mana on the front side, which is relatively cheap, getting that tax in the front half, and then also only being 3 defense, and it's also Wrath protection plus an Anthem. So I think there's a lot of stuff going on here to make this one specifically good. All right, I know this is a card. Well, I mean, maybe it's good in other decks. It's very, very good for mono green, which might be a bit of a resident sleeper, but we have to talk about it because it is incredibly good for mono green. So triple green for a 4/5 reach. So right there, like, just 3 mana, 4/5 reach. That card alone, even if it didn't have a backside, would be a lot better than Lovestruck Beast. Like, so much better than Lovestruck Beast. But it even has more upside than that. So, back half, is a 6/6 reach lifelink. Whenever it or another non-token Hydra you control dies, you get a 3/3 reach and a 3/3 lifelink. So it's like Wormcoil Engine, but instead of Death Touch, you're getting a Reacher, which is arguably worse, but, like, I don't know, whatever. But basically, yes, this is a mono green card. You're going to put this in your mono green deck. It's going to go in the flex spots. I would assume you probably play 2 to 3 copies of this, depending on how many flex spots there are. You probably don't want to play 4 because it is legendary, but yeah, I mean, there's not a ton else to talk about this. Just a really, really good card from mono green. And the fact that this has, like, 4/5 reach. One of mono green's worst matchups is Spirits, because Spirits, while it doesn't have a ton of great ways to counter the top end in a game 1 situation, because, like, a lot of the Spirit stuff are soft counters, like Geistlight Snare and Lofty Denial, and mono green can eventually get to a point where it makes enough mana to pay for those cards. This thing just being a 4/5 Bungus with reach, it's going to be really hard for Spirits to, like, apply enough pressure to the point where they can, like, get around this card while also holding up interaction. So it might actually fix the Spirits matchup for mono green. Number 2, Ozolith, the Shattered Spire. 2 mana, artifact, legendary. That is important. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be put on an artifact or creature you control, that many counters +1 are put on it instead. And then it has an activated ability where you can pay 2, tap, put a counter on an artifact or creature you control, activate only as a sorcery, and it also has cycling 2. So, we are, again, this context is mostly for the context of Pioneer, right? And a card that I have spent way too much time on over the past few months is Hardened Scales. And the biggest complaint that I always have with Hardened Scales is, in order to get into another copy of Hardened Scales, you have to play a different color, whether it's Conclave Mentor or what's the other one? Winding Constrictor. Now, we just have 8 copies of Hardened Scales without having to branch into a second color. And the really nice thing about that is it allows you to build your mana base in the way that you want to be building it, because some of the best cards that pair with these cards, Hardened Scales and Ozolith, happen to just work really well with Nykthos. You think a card like, what's the 3-drop that I always forget the name of? Yorvo. You think a card like Yorvo? Very powerful with Scales because it comes in with an additional counter, and when you play more green creatures, that gets double the counter, so it just keeps doubling and doubling. Another card that works very well with Scales and such is Vivian Arkbow Ranger. Again, these cards just have a ton of devotion. So the first shell that I want to build with Ozolith is going to be mono green. It's going to have the 8 scales, probably going to have Burning Tree Emissary, probably going to have Polukranos, and then you're going to do Vivian, Yorvo. You could even do Vorinclex at the top of the curve to have more payoff for even more payoff for scales and stuff. And the nice thing is you can also be a fight rigging deck, because the nice thing about fight rigging is the best way to pair with it is like expensive cards. And the biggest problem with fight rigging is that when you don't have fight rigging, it's really hard for you to cast your expensive cards. But if you just have like a really consistent good Nykthos shell, then even if you don't have fight rigging, you can still just cast all of your expensive cards. So I'm really, really excited. Number one, we've come this far. My number one card for, I guess you could say Pioneer, because I don't think this really is going to touch Modern that much, but number one card in March of the Machines, and I promise this has nothing to do with the fact that I just 5-0'd with the Dragon's deck last week. Promise it has nothing to do with that. Invasion of Tarkir. 2 mana, so 5 defense is a reasonably high number of defense. But, so again, it's only 2 mana, and you'll notice that the only 2 battles I have on my list are both 2 mana, so cheap battle equals good. Write that one down. When it enters the battlefield, reveal any number of dragon cards from your hand. When you do, it deals X plus 2 damage to any other target, where X is the number of cards revealed this way, and notably X can be 0. A lot of people read that as X can't be 0, but X in fact can be 0. So even if you have no other dragons, you can just play this as a 2 mana shock. Now, 2 mana for a shock, not that great, but if you have 1 dragon, you know, it starts scaling from there. Like if you reveal 2 dragons, 2 mana for 4 damage, pretty good. And then on the backside, we have, I'll resize again, Defiant Thundermaw. So Defiant Thundermaw is 4/4 flying trample. Whenever a dragon you control attacks, it deals 2 damage to any target. So basically, this thing flipped is really good. 4/4 flying trample, and just being able to hit 2 to anything whenever a dragon attacks, really good on the backside. So the nice thing about this card is the front side. Just being able to be a removal spell, even if you don't have any other dragons in your hand, it is pretty good. So, like, think about it that way. It's like removal spell with upside. And, you know, we've obviously been doing, we played some dragons last week where we had, let me put this up here. We played Dragon deck and Pioneer last week with, like, Thunderbreak Regent and Glorybringer and Stormbreath Dragon. And I think this is a pretty good addition to that deck, and one that I will definitely be playing a lot with.